thinking about like 70 years, because we'll talk more about the series, but like the beam is set in the 2090s. And thinking about 70 years ago in like the 1950s, imagine explaining Tinder to a world where like divorce is like the mark of Cain, or like children born out of wedlock are called bastards, right? You're explaining Tinder. Like it's an alien world. And in the beam, you actually have like what feels like not just like that there's a new internet, but there's a new internet that then replaces the new internet. And then it's 30 years after the new internet. And it's actually a real history. Like how did you guys get that ambitious? I feel like most sci-fi books are basically 30 years in the future with like spaceships, and then they kind of just call it there. And you guys actually did the thing.
Well,
Sean did the thing.
Yeah, no, Johnny did the thing. We did the thing together.
Well, we did the thing in different ways. Sean created. So this project actually existed in full as a completed first season before I touched it. And what we ended up doing was rewriting it. It just kind of wasn't what Sean had imagined. And so we took the original beats, which is what we call our outlines, because they're not quite outlines. And what came with those beats was a 70-year storyline, more than 70 years. I think we decided that we
started
officially
in
diverged.
2012. It started in 2012 back then because
that was in the future.
2012 was the future when the original outline was created.
I mean,
So we're not starting an alternate history of the past 8 years now on top.
And we've done
Right.
that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there are things that have happened in the beam that did not happen in the real world. And so we're just like, it's an alternate timeline as far as where we are. So Sean did that. Sean did that pre-work. And one of the things, the nature of our relationship is that you almost have to watch that you don't give me too much in advance, because I feel beholden to it. And I will shove stuff in just because it exists. And so, but I knew those things were there, and so I could cherry pick them. So there's things like the big environmental disaster that I think it melted the ice caps, and then the oceans rose, and that was one of the things that kind of threw the world into crisis mode. And and then after that happened, then we had the first beam and the second beam, and I don't know how much of that was in the. I feel like I'm all alone now. I can't see anybody else. I don't know if that was in the original story or not. But then what happens? The reason we're both giving each other credit is that a lot of that I invent on the fly as I go. So I don't remember if this was this way for Crossbrace and the beam, which is one of my favorite things. So in the year, I think 2063 maybe, Crossbrace, which was this revolutionary like Internet 3.0, came out, and then it was replaced a handful of years later by no. Crossbrace was like in the 40s, and then the beam was in the 60s, and it was like Crossbrace was built by people, and the beam was built by AI. So it was like in the beam they just gave them like a playground, and the AI built the beam, which is why it's this next level thing. I don't know how much of that was in advance and prepared, but I know for a fact that Shift. That's
one of my favorite stories. Actually,
That's such a cool concept. Yeah.
Yeah. So the beam is sci-fi, but it's also very political. Now, I actually hate politics in the real world. I can't stand it. But politics, like interpersonal politics, is candy to me. Like I love it when people fight and are bitchy to each other and stuff. And that's anything that's social politics, even like literal politics.
The Natasha Isaac stuff is super Johnny. Like, yeah, Natasha and Isaac's relationship is Johnny porn is what that is.
So there's two. I mean, it is political in that way, but not in a dry way. Where there's two political parties. There's the directorate, which is sort of like you get a stipend from the government based on your position, but then it doesn't really kind of matter if you actually do the work. I mean, some people do because work has to get done, but it's a guaranteed safety net basically, but you're also limited. Like you can't rise above that. You can't take other work, I don't think. And then there's enterprise where there's zero safety net, but the sky's the limit. So those people either fail catastrophically and end up like destitute, or they become, untethered billionaire capitalists or whatever who like ruin the world basically is what happens with our enterprise people, but whatever. We'd both be enterprise. And then Shift, we started talking about it, and we were like, well, what would happen? Like, are you committed forever if you decide that you're directorate, and can you change? And that's where the idea of Shift was born, which every 6 years, I think. Sean, do you remember?
Yeah, it was 6 years, which we did because we wanted to break away from the 4-year thing. And
right.
Yeah.
But
6 years feels like a bigger commitment too.
Yeah, that was invented mid-story, where we were like, and then it becomes part of the lore.
Wait. That wasn't. This is actually really cool. This is one of the ways that we work. So that was before the first book was written.
Oh, wow.
But it was Johnny's idea. So we had a story meeting, and our story meetings are just us talking. Now that COVID's on the other side, we can finally get together again. But typically, they've been on the phone. Back then, we didn't live in close proximity. We both live in Austin now.
Oh, cool.
We both lived in Ohio at the time, but I lived in Cincinnati.
But 4 hours apart.
He lived in Cleveland, so it wasn't really like living in close proximity. But we would talk, and like Johnny said, there was a fully existing version of this story in this world that another writer had written, but it was more of a production model where the work was paid for and kind of produced. I was producing it, and it wasn't really co-written in the way it is with Johnny. And so it had a lot of ideas, and Johnny had this stack of ideas. And one of the ways that Johnny works is he needs to understand the ideas. So he's kind of like validating the world. So what he'll do is he'll take some raw ideas, and then he'll interview me, essentially. Like, well, how does this work? How does this work? I don't understand this. And Shift was something specifically he was trying to get his head around. Or not Shift, but Enterprise and Directorate. So he's like, I like these political systems that you have, but I don't understand. Like, I'm not just going to say, okay, I'm Directorate forever, or I'm Enterprise forever. And we decided that you did need to take turns, like an election, something like that. But
that's so, because that's also an idea that with those friends that I got to read the Beam, we'll just kind of casually refer to that every once in a while with regard to kind of actual politics, because like the idea that right now we have two different parties and they hold these primaries where millions of people vote, and you have these two candidates that both sides are relatively excited to have win, and then a difference of 70,000 votes determines which one takes 100% of the power. It's obviously silly. And then like in the world of the Beam, it's that, both wind up being that you actually have an election where you have a president of both of these two political parties have different economic systems. And then one of them has a little bit more power than the other. Like that, it feels very lived in. So it makes sense it would have that kind of organic interview process.
It's like what we did, I think, with a lot of the politics was let the reader see that it's all theater. It's theater in this world, but it's theater in this world too, right? It's just
writing the Beam was a lot less fun this time, specifically because I was like, oh well, now I'm just reporting reality. Like it's no longer inventing anything.
Yeah, the difference in the world between season 3 and season 4 in our world for the authors is substantial.
And one thing that's wild there is that, because it's like it was 2015 when you guys wrote the third season of the Beam, right? So the first one was like 2012-ish, and then the most recent one.